is Virtual Environmental Education. This is our 8th lesson, Melting Glaciers. I am Anna. I'm the co-president of Sustainability Club, the club that created this program.
And I'm Joseph, the other co-president of Sustainability Club. So what is a glacier? A glacier is a persistent body of dense ice that is constantly moving under its own weight. A glacier forms where the accumulation or buildup of snow exceeds its vaporization, chipping, or other destructive processes, known as ablation. This process can happen over many years, but it tends to happen over centuries. Let's find out more about this. So this is a photo that depicts a typical glacier, and it represents a continental glacier, which we'll talk about more in this lesson.
Types of glaciers. There are two main types of glaciers. We have continental glaciers, which are ice sheets or ice caps, such as those that you'd find in Antarctica or Greenland over the land. And then we also have mountainous glaciers, which are ice aprons, cirques, niches, and basins.
So continental glaciers are glaciers that extend in long, continuous sheets. So currently, there's really two major classifications of continental glaciers, and these are small continental glaciers, which are known as ice fields, and large continental glaciers, which are called ice sheets. Greenland and Antarctica, as Anna mentioned, are mostly entirely covered with ice sheets, and they're the two largest ice sheets in the world. And they are about 2,100 meters thick, which equivalates to about 7,000 feet. That's crazy because it's over a mile. Here in this photo, it depicts a continental glacier, and as you can see, it's over the ocean and not over a mountain, and it is large and shelf-like.
Mountainous glaciers. Mountainous, also known as alpine glaciers, develop in mountainous regions. These glaciers can be small masses of glacial ice, or they can be a long glacial system that fills a valley. Mountainous glaciers begin in bowl-shaped hollows known as cirques at high points on mountains. Ice in contact with the mountain can be dark gray or brown in color due to the presence of rocks and sediments. And some examples of mountainous glaciers would be Mount Everest, Mount Kilimanjaro, the Alps in Europe and Alaska, and the Rocky Mountains on the west coast of the United States. And then some non-examples would be the Appalachian Mountains in the United States on the East Coast. Those would not be an example of mountainous glaciers because there are no ice. There's no ice formations on the top of the mountains. When valley glaciers flow out of the mountains, they spread out and join to form a Piedmont glacier. And this is just another example of mountainous glaciers. And then if you take a look at this picture, we can basically see that this is a mountain with a mountainous glacier. And this is because the mountain is covered in snow, and yeah.
Glacial formation. Glacial ice is composed of ice crystals, snow, air, water, and many sediments. Glaciers are mainly formed from compressed snow with only about a small portion due to the freezing of water. Glaciers form when the snow and ice that accumulate over the year are more than the damages done by melting. This means that as it keeps snowing and as more snow and ice are accumulative, the total amount or the net amount of snow and ice that are accumulated are more than the net amount or the total amount of melting that occurs. And in glacial ice, as the snow accumulates, the buried snow grains become tightly packed under the fresh snow. And as this process happens, it ends up that the buried snow grains become super tightly packed until it becomes like an ice crystallized structure. An example or a way to think about this is, for example, the winters in anywhere that it snows, such as like Chicago or the northern North America or southern South America areas where it snows. If you were to take the snow when it just snowed, it would be fresh like powder and it would be soft. However, if there's a lot of people walking on the snow and it's constantly being packed down, if you've ever grabbed it, it's kind of like a solid ice block rather than fresh powdery snow.
Let's talk about glacial structure. A glacier starts at a point called the glacier head and terminates at the glacier foot, snout, or terminus. And terminate just means end. for you guys that might not know, glaciers are broken into zones based on surface snowpack and melt conditions. The lower zone, where melting occurs faster than accumulation, is called the ablation zone. And in between the top and ablation zone, the glacier is in equilibrium. And when this area is disturbed, the glacier can either advance or retreat. And that basically means if it advances, more snow is being packed into the glacier, so it's becoming of a greater mass. And if it's retreating, it is losing mass due to melting, and the glacier is becoming smaller.
How do glaciers move? Glaciers, although they look like big solid chunks of ice that just are stationary and like don't move, but however, they're actually moving very slowly. So glaciers are able to move through the pressure from the weight on the top layer of the glacier. It causes the glacier to move. And for example, for land surfaces and like mountainous glaciers, the melting water at the bottom of a glacier helps the glacier actually move over these kinds of landscapes. So as I've mentioned that glaciers move slowly, they actually move naturally at a few centimeters or meters a day. However, there's a process called surging, and when this happens, glaciers speed up. And surging glaciers move faster. They move about tens of meters to even, in extreme cases, over 100 meters a day. However, so then with this, for about a year. So, for example, like June, July, and August, some glaciers might surge and move really fast, and then without the rest of the year, they're just moving at a normal rate. Where others may surge only periodically, and this can happen between every 15 and 100 years if it's periodic.
Glaciers around the world. Glaciers are found on every continent on the planet, and they cover 10% of land on Earth. Most glaciers are found above the snow line, which are regions where there are high levels of snowfall in summer and cold temperatures during winter. Depending on where in the world a glacier is, the snow line is at different levels. So in places such as countries in Africa, there will be higher snow line than in places such as Antarctica, which has a snow line of sea level. And there's a lot of factors going into snow line, but some of the most prominent would be elevation, latitude, the proximity to sea, and the climate. So, for example, if you're in a hotter place, you're more likely to have no snow than there to be a snow day than if you're in a really cold place where you're likely to have snow. So the same would be in snow line. You're less likely to have a day's snowfall if you are in Mexico than if you are in Antarctica. So that's why we go to places such as Mexico for vacation to go to the beach rather than Antarctica, which is much colder and the snow line is much lower. The world's largest glacier is called the Lambert-Fisher Glacier, and it is located in Antarctica. It is 50 miles wide, 250 miles long, and a little more than 8,000 feet deep. And this is pretty crazy how large it is because it is the size of some islands and some really tiny states in the country. And then it's also larger than some countries around the world as well. So if we take a look at this picture, basically this is all the glaciers around the world. And as you can see, there's one located on every single continent. There's a lot located in the Arctic Circle. That's where Greenland and northern Canada are. Also, places such as Norway are located this high, and that's just basically what I'm circling right now. We also got some on the west side of Northern America, and then also on the west side of South America. And then we got quite a few on the tip of Antarctica. So they're basically all around the world. And then the ones in Africa are just on the tops of mountains, and these are mountainous glaciers, as we discussed before.
So glaciers and how they affect geology. So glaciers can erode terrain and cause glacial landforms. And the process that glaciers go through to do this are called abrasion and plucking. Abrasion means to scrape or wear something away. And an example of this is scraping your arm. If you scrape your arm, it takes some skin away and you have a little bit less skin cells. And this kind of is what happens to like mountains and other landforms with glaciers. Like it slowly chips away and takes away some of the rocks and sediments of the mountain or the landform that it's affected. Plucking is when happens when you take hold or remove something from its place. If you were to pluck a blueberry off of a bush, you're taking the blueberry away from the bush. So this is what happens to these kind of landforms. Glaciers can form valleys, which are just like U-shaped valleys or V-shaped valleys, and it's where like in between two mountains or two higher elevated land masses, and there's a lower elevated landmass in between the two, and that would be a valley. Glaciers form fjords and hanging valleys through erosion. There's also cirques, which are bowl-shaped cuts in the mountain glaciers that are carved at high elevation. So think about like a lake. If you were to take a lake um, at the top of a mountain on like the higher elevation at the like edge, that would be like a cirque when it's frozen. And then pneumatocs, arêtes, and horns are landforms in mountains that are caused by glacial erosion in multiple directions. And the kind of things that are formed by these are peaks and like ridge lines in mountains. And then as we can see in this photo that depicts all of the landforms or glacial formations that happen. As you can see, there's the Valley Glacier, which is in between the two big mountainous peaks, and it empties out into the high U-shaped valley in between them. There's the cirques, which you can see are bowls or kind of like dips in the side of the mountain at the top near the like peak. And then the horns make the peaks of the mountains, as you can see in the picture. And then the arête is like the ridge line of the mountain on the back right mountain.
Glacial mass imbalance. Glacial mass imbalance is when glaciers gain and lose ice. It is thought of as glacier health because glaciers lose too much. If glaciers lose too much ice to melting, it diminishes, but if it gains ice, it flourishes. Glaciers receive snow and ice through accumulation, which gains from precipitation, avalanches, and windblown snow. And this basically means precipitation would be if it snowed down not water, but snow. So, for example, we know precipitation rains down water, but it can either be frozen or it could be just regular water. And then we also have avalanches, and that's just large accumulations of snow. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen a video of an avalanche, but basically it packs up lots of snow and it gains a lot of momentum, so it's moving really fast. And that can pack up a lot of snow and add to the glaciers. And then we also have windblown snow, and that's basically snow drifting. Glaciers can also lose snow and ice through ablation, which happens because of surface melt, meltwater runoff, sublimation, as well as avalanches and windblown snow. Because we know in the case of accumulation, the avalanches, the snow from avalanches and windblown snow have to be coming from somewhere. So it may be coming from the glacier that is going through ablation.
So why are glaciers melting? Well, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions have increased the rate of global warming due to their heat trapping properties. So the rates of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases have radically increased since the Industrial Revolution began around 1850. So since 1850, the amount of greenhouse gases that have been pumped into the atmosphere have just been on a steady, dramatic incline. A period known as the Little Ice Age occurred from around 1550 to 1850, and when the Earth's temperatures were cooler. However, the Industrial Revolution, which started in 1850, ended this period of the Earth being colder. Scientists predict that if the emissions were to continue at the same rate that they are today, that the Arctic could be ice-free by 2040. And as we've mentioned in previous lessons, that this is about 2.3% of the world's like water in gallons. And so all of this water being displaced has to find a way, and it creates some issues if the glaciers keep melting.
So what are some problems caused by melting glaciers? Losing glaciers creates dark ocean patches, which can absorb heat and in turn accelerate the rate of global warming. So, like Joseph talked about a few lessons ago, there's something called albedo, and that basically means that darker surfaces absorb more heat than lighter surfaces, which are able to reflect heat. So if we're absorbing more heat because there are more darker ocean patches, that in turn causes a feedback loop, which accelerates the rate of global warming. And we know already that accelerating the rate of global warming or making a specific patch of the ocean warmer will just in turn cause the melting of glaciers to occur much faster. It can also cause entire fisheries to collapse and increase the amount of severe storms. Coastal areas are flooded due to rising sea levels, and even billions to trillions of dollars will be caused in damage, and that could be detrimental to our economy. Animals such as polar bears, penguins, and walruses are all losing their homes as they survive on the ice in places such as Greenland and Antarctica. And if they do lose their homes, we're going to lose those species, which could be really terrible just because we don't want to be the problem for why so many species had to go extinct.
So, with all of this in mind, what are some responses that we can have as individuals to the melting glacier problem? As individuals, we would want to ensure that we're making a difference at the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is the greenhouse gas and carbon emissions that we're constantly putting into the atmosphere. So, to tackle this at the root of the problem, we need to start by reducing our individual carbon emissions. In previous lessons, we discussed many methods on how to reduce your carbon emissions, such as reducing the amount of meat you eat, driving your car less, and reducing the amount of energy you use at home. All of these cause businesses that constantly put out greenhouse gases to put out less because there's a less demand for meat. So there's less demand for meat, which means there's less meat being raised in the world in factory farms, which decreases the amount of emissions coming from factory farms. Reducing the amount of energy at your home reduces the demand for energy companies need to supply to us, which decreases their burning and use of fossil fuels and other non-renewable resources. Driving your car less also creates for there to be just less use of gas and exhaust into the atmosphere. In addition to just us as people reducing our meat intake and the energy we use at our home, we can also contact our local elected officials to find out about any action that our own cities are taking against the rise of CO2 levels. And we can also sign petitions asking cities and countries around the world to go carbon neutral by a specific year.
So, why are melting glaciers important to sustainability? Learning about melting glaciers is important to sustainability because we need to understand why glaciers melting can in turn accelerate the rate of global warming. We already know that losing glaciers results in rising sea levels because there is a lot of water trapped in glaciers. But we also need to understand that if we lose glaciers, we can trap more heat and we can lose many more species that make up important facets of the ecosystems on the planet. Letting glaciers melt unchecked is extremely unsustainable because they are vital to keeping the climate in check. And if we lose them, our planet and our lives will change forever.